with me?
I'm starting. What did you do with the Peace Corps in Uzbekistan?
First I taught English, and then I also taught economics and accounting and business to people that were college-age students.
Why did you go there?
Well, it was right after college, and I was really interested in seeing all different parts of the world and having a kind of a cool adventure right after college. So I decided to volunteer for the Peace Corps, and they accepted me, and they sent me to Uzbekistan.
Who did you go with?
I went with 52 other people that were part of the Peace Corps group, and one of those people was your mother, and that's where we met.
What was it like there?
It was completely different than what you would expect here in the United States. The cars were different, clothes were different, people were different, language was different, climate was different, food was different, everything was different.
What was it? What did you wear?
I wore normal American clothes like jeans or pants or sometimes tie. But during special occasions, I wore some of the Uzbek attire. So like if I would go to a wedding, they would give me a special robe to wear.
What did the shelter look like?
People's houses looked kind of different depending on where you were in the country. If you lived in the city, it was mostly concrete block apartment buildings, 8 or 10 stories. But if you lived out in the villages, meaning the countryside, they kind of looked like U-shaped buildings with a big gate in front. And then once you walked inside, the buildings were made out of mud and straw. And then in the middle of the courtyard is where people ate and is where people cooked. And it's also where people had big gardens that they would take their food and vegetables from. And sometimes, one of the families that I lived with, they even had a cow in their courtyard, which they used for food and milk.
What did the food look like?
What did the food look like?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't have much variety in food. It was either meat or rice. And then the dish that they would always serve was a big plate that they called osh or plof. And it was usually served on a big plate for everyone. Nobody got their separate plates. And it was rice piled up with onions and carrots and cottonseed oil and meat. And they wouldn't even give you spoons. You'd have to eat it with your hands. So you'd dig your fingers into it. Everyone would dig their fingers into it and then pop the stuff into their mouth.
What were the people like?
The people were great. So imagine a place where they didn't have much money. They didn't have many of the things that we typically have, but they were extremely giving of their time and everything that they had, and they basically just wanted to have a good time with us, share stories, and be friends with us. So they were great people.
I would like to go there someday. I was thinking, how could I get in?
How could you get into Uzbekistan? Well, the first thing that you'd have to do is to go to the embassy of Uzbekistan in Washington, D.C., and you would have to get a visa. That's basically a permission slip for you to go to Uzbekistan. And then once we got that, we'd have to get a plane ticket, and then I would call or email all my friends that are still over there and tell them my son Milo's coming, and they would open their houses to you, and you could stay there for as long as you want.
What language do they speak?
Well, it really depends on what part of the country you were living in. If you were in the capital, which was Tashkent, most of the people spoke Russian. If you were in one of the smaller villages or towns like I was and your mom was out in the eastern part of the country, they would speak Uzbek, which is kind of like Turkish. And if you were in the western part of the country, which was like a very kind of sandy desert, they would speak Tajik, which is like Persian. You have to remember, none of these languages are anything like the other. So a lot of people in that country spoke 3 languages, sometimes even 4 or 5. So it was pretty cool.
What animals live there?
What animals live there? Well, I didn't see very many animals because it was mostly desert and a lot of agriculture. But the animals that I did see were, I saw a few snakes. One time I saw a scorpion in the desert. And then most frequently I saw stuff like falcons or big hawks. But they don't have things. I never saw a deer, never saw squirrels. They don't have squirrels there. I never saw a raccoon there, so I didn't see very many animals.
What was the weather like?
The weather, it was kind of, in the summertime, it was like someone took a hairdryer and was putting it right in your face. So it was really, really hot, but really, really dry because it was mostly in the desert. And the winters were really short, so maybe 2 or 3 months compared to our 6 or 7 months here. And it didn't get very cold, and it snowed sometimes, but the weather, even though it wasn't really cold, we would get very cold because in most of the apartments that we lived in, or the houses, they didn't have heat. So even on a 30-degree day, it was really, really cold.
Good job, Dad.